Good evening. Welcome to the Bradford County Historical Society and Friday night at the museum, which we are finally starting on time for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. It's just amazing. So just a few announcements before Henry gets started. There's a card out on the counter out there. We didn't put them on your chairs this time, so if you want to grab a schedule of what's coming up this year, they are out there. Help yourself to as many as you want. We have both educational as well as musical programs again this year, so we're looking forward to each of those. Also, if you didn't pick up the card that's out there, we're starting back up again with this. The card is what you bring to Friday night at the museum program each month and get it punched, and then if you get all 6 punched, meaning you've come to all 6 programs, in October we put them in a drawing, and then you win up to $50 worth of something in the gift shop. So all that information's on the back of the card. So, yeah, hey. So that's what's going on this program. Also, the museum is open now. The research library is open upstairs. The museum this year is open Wednesday and Thursday, 10 to 4. As well as on Saturday from 10 to 2 on the first Saturday of the month, and the library is open the regular hours Wednesday through Friday 10 to 4 and the first Saturday of the month 10 to 2. So if that's confusing, just give us a call. We'll be glad to let you know when we're open. So there's still the anniversary exhibit upstairs if you missed that last year because we were only open part of the year. The history of the Historical Society is up in the rotating exhibit room in the front second floor corner of the building, and we did a lot of work putting together all of that information on what has gone on with the Historical Society over 150 years. It's pretty amazing that we've been around that long. So tonight's program is the Packer family, Sayre, the hospital, Donald Guthrie, and the clinic. All sorts of things going on all in one. And the person that will be doing that is none other than Henry Farley, who's the expert on that topic. So we'll turn it over to Henry.
Thank you, Matt. I'd also just like to point out that we are offering for the first time tonight for our membership live streaming of this program. And we have people from all over the country who will be seeing this because they're members, and we've made it available to them, one of which is my brother who lives in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So it's kind of fun that people that can't be here for these things are able to enjoy them as we do them. As Matt said, this is kind of all over the place tonight, so kind of bear with me because what I'm doing is telling you about how Sayre started and how everything kind of segued into the hospital and what Sayre is today. So the first slide that you see up there, Sayre, Pennsylvania, a railroad town, is named after Robert H. Sayre, a railroad man of rare moral character and ability. And I went online to find this photo because usually the pictures you see of Robert Sayre is an old man with this great big long white beard. And this was Sayre in 1881. It's kind of interesting. This is John Murray did this, who did the local photos of all the towns. That's John Murray right there. He put himself in every lithograph that he did. I like to point out that is the Wilbur House in Sayre right there. That was started by Robert Packer in 1881, and he died in 1883. It wasn't done, and at that time they changed the name to the Wilbur House, but notice there's no roof or tower on it. So it was just being built in 1881 when this lithograph was done. No, that's downtown in Sayre. It's that big hotel. That's the Robert Packer house right there. Okay, Sayre the town was born out of necessity due to the tremendous coal traffic foreseen and developed under Robert Sayre's supervision. In 1812, coal was discovered in Barkley Mountain, 12 miles south of Towanda. However, it was not to be made available in any quantity until the Barkley Railroad was opened. The first train to Waverly was in September of 1867. The Barkley Railroad made the transfer of coal from the mountain much more productive than the horse and wagon delivery system used up to that point. The semi-bituminous coal of Barkley was the fuel needed to fuel the steam engines in the growing metropolitan areas such as Buffalo. That's the coal at Barkley. That's a Barkley Railroad engine with passenger cars. And this is the coal trestle at East Waverly. It's also up here on the wall. And that's where the Barclay coal was transferred to the Erie Railroad for shipment. The gauge of the railroad track from Pennsylvania to New York was different, so the Pennsylvania trains could not cross over to the Erie line, so they had to build this to transfer the coal. So the Barclay trains went up on the top and dumped the coal down into the Erie cars. And this was in East Waverly, but it's probably one of the biggest reasons that Sayre exists today, because the cars were starting to break down and needed repair, and down the road a little ways became the third largest repair facility for railroad cars in the world, the Lehigh Valley Railroad. So this is Asa Packer. And I'm going to tell you all about the Packers because they were very instrumental in the development of the area. Asa Packer was born into humble circumstances to Elijah and Desiree Packer on December 29, 1805. He came from a small family having only 4 siblings. That's not small today. As a youngster, Asa's education was limited to entering the tannery of Elisha Stoningham. In 1822, at the age of 17, he left home in Mystic, Connecticut, and set out on foot to Brooklyn, Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania, where he apprenticed as a carpenter to his cousin, Edward Packer. In 1827, Asa traveled to New York seeking employment in his new trade, but to no avail. He returned to Susquehanna County within a year, settling in Springfield Township. On January 23, 1828, Asa married, having caught the eye of Sarah Minerva Blakesley, daughter of Zophar and Clarenda Whitmer Blakesley. The Packers celebrated their marriage among family and friends at a small country inn belonging to Sarah's sister in Dimmick, Four Corners, Susquehanna County. Together, Asa and Sarah rented a tilled farm that belonged to Sarah's father. The crops proved to be so poor and the markets were so distant that by the end of 4 years, the newlyweds were just as poor as when they had first started. In the winter of 1832, hearing that men were needed to captain coal barges on the Lehigh Canal, Asa traveled to Mauch-Chunk, Pennsylvania. Once there, he made an engagement to hire out for the summer, and later returned to home to settle his affairs. In the spring of 1833, the Packer family set out for Mauch-Chunk. As the years passed, Asa became a commander on the canal boats, and later became a contractor building locks on the canal from Mauch-Chunk to Whitehaven. In 1839, Asa established large contracts to build locks on the upper Lehigh River. When he finished with large profits, where he finished in large profits. In 1849, in partnership with his brother Robert, Asa established large contracts from Stockholm and Stevens of New Jersey to build boats on the Schuylkill River for the direct shipment of coal to New York. By 1852, Asa was a wealthy man. The canal system had its drawbacks, especially during the winter months. Coal transport was limited due to the harsh winters. A faster method of transportation was needed. In October of 1851, risking financial ruin, Asa purchased nearly all the controlling stock and interest that was subscribed for the unfinished Delaware, Lehigh, Schuylkill, and Susquehanna Railroad from Mauch-Chunk to Easton, PA, connecting there to the New Jersey and Belvidere Railroads, thereby furnishing outlets to New York and Philadelphia. Asa held that in exchange for the work. He was to receive the company's stocks and bonds. In May of 1855, a cab of the locomotive, Great Wall, was mounted in South Easton and driven 4 miles up the line, christened the Lehigh Valley Railroad. In January of 1853, the first trainload of coal was transferred from Mauch-Chunk to Easton, and that was in September of 1855. When Asa Packer died in 1879, his estate was valued at $52.5 million. Not bad for a guy that walked from Mystic, Connecticut to Susquehanna County. There's Asa Packer again. This is Lucy Packer. This was the oldest daughter of Asa and his wife, and her name was Linderman. She died quite young. This is Robert Asa Packer, who was the eldest son. Harry Eldred Packer, and then that's Mary Packer Cummings. This is the Asa Packer Mansion in Mauch-Chunk. It's now called Jim Thorpe, by the way. The impressive Italianate villa was built in 1861 for $14,000. This is the main stairwell of their home. And this is the chandelier in their house And this is an interesting story. This was used as the model for the chandelier in Gone with the Wind. So in Scarlett's house that they built, in the big main stairway, there's a chandelier. It's an exact replica of this chandelier. So it's kind of neat that there's a part of Pennsylvania in Gone with the Wind. This is looking down from the hills in Mauchuk down on Jim Thorpe and the Asa Packer Mansion, and right next to it, whoops, that's Harry Packer's mansion. In 2012, I represented Guthrie at the Asa Packer Remembrance Day held at the Asa Packer Mansion on the 100th anniversary of Mary Packer Cummings' death. I'm pictured there at that day with the elected officials of Jim Thorpe. And I took this picture while there because it's the grave of Robert Packer to verify that he actually is buried there, because he was buried in Tioga Point first, and then they exhumed him and moved him down with the family. I think after his widow remarried, I think they felt that he needed to be with the family. This is just some pictures. This is at Broken Oar when you come down the hill out of Ulster, of the Lehigh Valley. This was their signature scene. This was used in all the stations across the Lehigh Valley in this area. Broken Oar. If you come down the hill from Ulster, there's a red camp that people from New Jersey are always there. It's right at the foot of that hill. And this is the railroad track along there. Just another Robert Packer. This is just to show that the Lehigh Valley grew and grew. This is an invitation to the opening excursion of the Pennsylvania and New York Railroad and Canal Company in 1869. This was the first train to come to Towanda. And so there were no trains to Towanda except the Barclay train until 1869. The Lehigh Valley came here and they went up to Sayre. That was the excursion. And Eleanor Fitzgerald Smith Fox gave me that. Her uncle, that's his invitation. It's an actual invitation from the excursion, so it's kind of neat to have. They did have a big picnic on the lawn of the courthouse when they got to Towanda that day. This is Robert Asa Packer. And this is Emily Victorine Pilette. And she was the daughter of the Bradford County entrepreneur Victor Pilette. And Robert Asa Packer was born in Mauchuk, now Jim Thorpe, November 19, 1842. He was the eldest son of Judge Asa Packer. After attending the Polytechnic Institute at Troy, New York, he joined the Lehigh Valley Railroad as the chief of the Corps of Engineers. He was installed as superintendent of the Pennsylvania and New York Railroad in 1871. And when he first came here, he lived in Towanda. And then eventually he went to Sayre. Robert and Emily were married in the rotunda of the Pilot Mansion, and so I like to throw that in there. And if you go in there, just walk into the rotunda and look around and think of a big wedding in there. And the write-up of the wedding talks about all the guests standing up on the balconies of the rotunda looking down on the marriage ceremony. So this is the mansion and carriage house Robert Packer and his family built and moved into their handsome residence in September of 1876. J.E. Fleming was the architect and builder. He was from Towanda and was responsible for the project, which was said to cost $60,000. A housewarming was held February 8, 1877, which was said to be one of the most impressive affairs ever given in this area. Packer was said to have said that he wanted the finest house in the northern tier of Pennsylvania and the southern tier of New York. In July of 1881, the Packers added a large addition to the south end of the mansion. This is the study in the Packer Mansion, one of the bedrooms. It's another bedroom. Note the fabric walls in the bedrooms. And every bedroom has a little picture of Robert Packer. I thought that was interesting that he was in every room. This is the dining room, which was added in 1881. And what's fascinating about the dining room is it had a hand-carved Moroccan leather ceiling that cost $50,000. We have a table at the Sayre Museum in Sayre that was made from pieces of the Packer Mansion, and in that is a big square of the hand-carved Moroccan leather. So we ought to sell that. Maybe we can get some money out of it. But it's interesting to see how ornate it was, and to think that then it cost that much money. You can't imagine what it would cost now. This is just to show you that the Packer Mansion had greenhouses. and beside it is their carriage house. And this is Keystone Bluff in Jacksonville, Florida, where Robert Packer died in 1883. And this is Harry, again, the brother, who died in 1884. So this left the only surviving sibling of the Packers, Mary Packer. Mary, who was single and 46 years of age, was the only member of the immediate family after her brothers Robert and Harry died. Women were viewed as second-class citizens, but their rights had been greatly expanded after New York's passage of the Married Women's Property Act of 1848, which many states effectively mirrored. In order to gain control of her father's fortune, Mary decided it was time she married. This entered into the picture Mr. Charles Cummings. Charles Cummings, a close family friend of the Packers, worked for the Lehigh Valley Railroad. Mary was intelligent and definitely ahead of her time. Had to be. Charles signed a prenuptial agreement to be filed in the Carbon County, Pennsylvania. It stated that Mary would receive the home, the property, and more importantly, the family fortune. In return, Charles would receive $100,000 in Lehigh Valley Railroad stock. They were married on April 7, 1885. Mary retained the title of Mrs. while inheriting the family fortune, $54.5 million, which made her the wealthiest woman in the United States, second in the world just behind Her Majesty Queen Victoria of England. Mary and Charles divorced in 1893. Mary Packer Cummings was a friend to Sayre and bestowed several large gifts to the people of Sayre. The first was the home of her late brother, Robert, to be used as a hospital for the railroad workers. The second was the Church of the Redeemer, built with stone from Barkley Mountain. And this was built in 1888. In 1912, Mary Packer Cummings had the church beautified. The Wilbur Hotel, built by her brother Bob, was originally called the Packer House. It was given to support the new nurses training school in 1901. The Wilbur House exists today as an apartment building. The Coleman Memorial Parish House was given by Mary Packer Cummings in 1909. The Coleman Parish House stood from 1909 until 1981, when it was torn down to make way for the Guthrie Behavioral Health Building. Coleman Memorial Fitness. This was a gymnasium in the parish house. This was the round pond which stood on the property, built by Robert Packer when he built the mansion. This was the children's playground at the parish house. And this was the famous Coleman Memorial Athletic Field where all the baseball games and everything went on in Sayre. And that would have been down in the southwest corner of the parking lots of the Robert Packer Guthrie Clinic now. This was the children's ward, which was built in 1912, and this was the last gift of Mary Packer Cummings because she died in 1912. This view of the Robert Packer campus just kind of shows Mary Packer Cummings' gifts, the mansion, the church. There's the parish house. You can see behavioral health stands on that corner now. The children's ward is back there. But that gives you an idea of what the Robert Packer campus looked like back in the day. This is Mary Packer Cummings in Florida. Mary Packer Cummings in her old age. And that it's Mrs. John Witt, the butler's wife, Julia, a nurse's maid, and Mary Packer Cummings. Mary Packer Cummings died October 29, 1912 in Cape May, New Jersey. And if you go to Jim Thorpe or Mock Chunk and visit the mansion and stuff, they tell you all about the things that she did for that town. She put an elevator in the Episcopal Church in Jim Thorpe, and the first person to ride it was Mary Packer Cummings in her casket for her funeral. So. This is the growing Robert Packer Hospital. It shows the Hewitt Pavilion, which was one of the first additions to the mansion. One of the first ambulances. The horse's name was Dolly. The women's ward, and you can see that's definitely in the mansion. One of the first x-ray machines. An operating room. And that's in one of the additions. There's another women's ward. No privacy. A new ambulance. And this is Dr. Ott, who was surgeon-in-chief in the operating room. That's Dr. Ott right there. And notice no face masks. So, yep, they have gloves. Yeah. Right there's the guy's head. And that's some sort of a tent or something that they're using for the surgery, I would say. I don't know. Have any ideas, doctor, what it is? Well, that's just so you can see Dr. Ott.
They would use ether, and they would have a screen to keep the ether from the anesthesiologist from passing out.
Okay.
That may be what that is.
Probably. In that picture, Dr. Ott died in 1909. And this is the beginning of the Guthrie era. It began January 10th, 1910. Dr. Guthrie's first name was George, not Donald, as was his father, so he went through life using his middle name, Donald. On January 10th, 1910, Dr. Donald Guthrie was elected by the Board of Trustees of the Robert Packer Hospital to the position of Surgeon-in-Chief. His salary was $3,000 a year. Throughout his long period of service from January 10th, 1910 until his death, he held the respect and admiration of all the staff who never questioned his ability as a surgeon, nor his splendid surgical judgment, nor his fairness. They accepted his decisions and were happy to work with him and be part of the wonderful organization he built from nothing to a senior staff of 39 men and a junior staff of 28 fellows and residents and 11 interns. Donald Guthrie was born June 23, 1880, the son of Dr. George and Sarah Hollenbach Wright Guthrie of Wilkes-Barre, PA. On his mother's side, Dr. Guthrie traced his ancestry to one of the oldest and best-known families in Bradford County, Matthias Hollenbach, Sayre Guthrie's ancestor, who settled at Tioga Point, now Athens, in the 1780s. Dr. Guthrie received his early education in Wilkes-Barre schools. He graduated from Yale University with a bachelor's in philosophy and entered medical school at the University of Pennsylvania and graduated from there in 1905. After serving a year and a half at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital as an intern, Dr. Guthrie went to Rochester, Minnesota, where for 3 years and 4 months he was a member of the staff and physicians and surgeons in the Mayo Hospital, which was the largest institution of its size in the world. No. And that's Donald Guthrie right there.
I think that's artistic license. You take the mask down off your face so you can get recognition on the photograph.
Okay. And this picture, Dr. Guthrie is second from the right, standing with Dr. William Mayo. There is Dr. Guthrie, there's Dr. William Mayo. That's Dr. Flagg, who was another famous Mayo physician who came to Sayre. The nuns never came, though. St. Mary's Hospital, yeah. And Mayo Clinic's hospital is St. Mary's Hospital. This is another Dr. Guthrie during surgery, and that's Dr. Guthrie right there. And then this is the People's Cooperative Hospital, and that was Sayre's other hospital. And Dr. Charles Ott, Superintendent and Surgeon-in-Chief of the Robert Packer Hospital, died on November 1st, 1999. Dr. Russell B. Lynn was appointed by the board as Surgeon-in-Chief temporarily on November 10th, 1909. And at a meeting of the Robert Packer trustees on November 30th, 1909, Donald Guthrie was recommended for the Surgeon-in-Chief post. But the decision was deferred until the January 10, 1910 meeting due to a petition from the physicians of Sayre, Athens, and Waverly requesting an open hospital. The open hospital concept came about when Dr. Ott died, as past practice at Robert Packer Hospital had been that any patient being admitted for any reason was placed under the care of the surgeon-in-chief. The local physicians wanted to have the position of surgeon-in-chief eliminated and the staff of physicians and surgeons be appointed. The Valley physicians wanted the right to admit their patients to the private rooms of the hospital, not the wards, and they did not want their patients placed under the care of the surgeon-in-chief unless they required surgery. Robert Packer Hospital policy at the time was that private rooms had to be applied for and approved by the surgeon-in-chief. When the Board of Trustees offered the position of surgeon-in-chief to Dr. Guthrie, he accepted with certain reservations, the most important of which was that he be solely responsible for the care of the patients and that he be given a free hand in organizing and developing the staff of men who were to work with him. The local physicians formed an academy of medicine, and they all resigned from the staff of Robert Packer Hospital and purchased the right property on the southwest corner of Wilbur Avenue and Hayden Street in Sayre, directly across the street from the hospital. And they applied for a charter, elected officers, and the People's Cooperative Hospital was born. So when Dr. Guthrie came to Sayre in 1910, he didn't have a staff. You know, everybody was at the hospital across the street.
Where was that hospital?
It's right on the, do you know where behavioral health is? Across the street, there's a parking lot. It was right there in that corner. Yeah, it was walking distance from the Robert Packer over to the People's. So, and they had a school of nursing. They had a lot of things. In 1929, People's closed, and they moved to Waverly and became Tioga General Hospital. So this is Dr. Guthrie and the staff in 1912. And these are assistant physicians who were later called interns. And there's the staff of 1913. As Dr. Guthrie and his team grew, so did the hospital. This is the private room pavilion in 1917. We have pieces of monogrammed china and silverware from the private rooms in the archives at Guthrie, so it was a fancy place to go. It's another shot of the private rooms pavilion. Dr. Guthrie and Nina Smith. Nina Smith was directress of nursing from 1921 to 1951. And there's Dr. Guthrie early in his career passing the private rooms pavilion. I always throw this in because where I work, this is the Robert Packer Hospital kitchen in 1915. And this is Dr. Guthrie and Emily Baker. They were married December 2nd, 1916 in New York City. They met at the Jenningshurst Farm in Towanda, which is now the Villa Center restaurant. And the story that goes with that is that Eulalie Kaiser and one of the Jennings girls went to the Ely School in Connecticut, where Nixon's daughters went there, I believe. And for a graduation present, they were given the summer home of the Jennings family for parties and whatnot. So at a party at the Jennings cottage, or whatever, summer home, Donald Guthrie and Emily Baker were introduced, and love bloomed, and that's how she got to Towanda, or got to Sayre, whatever. This was the chief's house on South Wilbur Avenue, and that today that would touch the entrance to the Patterson building, if you're familiar with that. So it was right equal to the entrance to the Patterson building. There's the chief's house in winter. And this is after the Guthries had it updated and modernized when they took possession. And I can remember that house very well. This is titled A Group of Leading Medical Men. This is the staff of Robert Packer Hospital in 1925. The Robert Packer Hospital School of Nursing was founded in 1901. This building was completed in 1927. The school remained a diploma school until 1987, when the program was merged with Mansfield University. Today it is known as the Robert Packer Department of Nursing at Mansfield University. This is another shot of the school right after it was completed. This is Dr. and Mrs. Guthrie coming home from hunting. Howard Bishop, the administrator of the hospital, is with them holding the gun. This is Dr. and Mrs. Guthrie in their home. This is Dr. Charles Mayo with his son, Dr. Charles W. Mayo. Charles W. interned at the Robert Packer in 1926. This was considered an honor for Dr. Guthrie that the Mayos would send their sons to Dr. Guthrie for training. So later shot of Dr. Guthrie. And this is the foundation of the Guthrie Clinic building in 1927. And this is the Guthrie Clinic in 1928, is now the Byrd Sumner Administration Building. And up to this point, when this building was built, Dr. Guthrie's clinic was spread all throughout the Robert Packer Hospital. The Guthrie Clinic actually started when he came. He right away started establishing departments, and so it just grew and grew and grew. And it was all through the buildings of the hospital. So in 1926 through 28, they decided they needed to get them into one building, and there it is. This was the invitation to the dedication of the clinic, October 11th, 1928. And these are widely known men who attended the dedication of the Guthrie Clinic. That's Charles Marvin. He was from Owego, and he financed the construction of the nursing school. Dr. Charles Mayo. This is E.E. Loomis, the president of the Lehigh Valley Railroad. And this is H.A. Gibbons of Princeton. That's Louis Pilette, who was the president of the board of the Robert Packer. That is the Bishop Sterrett of the Episcopal Church. Dr. Guthrie. This is Rodney Merker from Towanda. This is Father Kelly, who had been a priest at Epiphany, but then rose into prominence in the Diocese of Scranton. And this is A.I. Decker. So this was featured in a lot of newspapers and articles that they were the prominent people there. This is the Guthrie Clinic staff in 1928, and Dr. William Mayo is standing in the center of that photograph. This is Dr. Guthrie with his dog, Rip Van Winkle. And this ambulance was given in let's see if I know I don't know the date it was given. It was given by Cortez and Worth Jennings. And this was the first automobile, so this was a major step forward from the horse and wagons that were used previously. And this is May 3rd, 1933, when fire hit the Robert Packer Hospital. A large section of the hospital was destroyed by fire. Within 48 hours after the catastrophe, patient care had resumed and steps had been taken to erect a new hospital. The Hewitt Memorial Pavilion was completely destroyed by the fire. The hospital received only $98,875 in insurance after the fire. The damage done by the fire was in excess of $500,000. The Packer Mansion is in the background of this photo, so it was all said that the Packer Mansion burned. It didn't burn. There it is after the fire. This view from an airplane shows the campus after the cleanup from the fire. Note the Lehigh Valley Yards in the background. You can see the roundhouse and the big shops. So, whoops, that's all the Lehigh Valley over there. This is another great shot of the campus, which shows the famous Coleman Memorial Field, where would be the Clinic South parking lot today. During the fire of 1933, a baby was born. Dr. John Higgins, his granddaughter is here. Dr. John Higgins and Dr. David Taylor, an intern, worked by flashlight to deliver the baby. Immediately after the baby's birth, firemen carried her to the Coleman Parish House and carried the mother to her home on Chemung Street in a bed. And as I was told, they folded her up in a mattress and carried her in the house in the folded mattress. Pictured here are Mrs. Ray Lewis and her daughter Rosalind. Mrs. Rosalind Jarvis told me that when she was born, the papers in the description of the fire said that a baby boy was born that night, and that every time her sister was angry with her when growing up, she would say, "Well, we got the wrong baby. Our baby was a boy." This is a photo of Mrs. Lewis and Rosalind taken at the time of the 100th anniversary of the RPH. Mrs. Lewis was also the holder of the first B number. If you're a patient of Guthrie, you know what a B number is. And it was issued to her on June 1st, 1927, so that the theory that the records burned in the fire does not hold, as B number started 6 years prior to the fire. Rosalind Jarvis lives right down the street from me. She was 89 on May 3rd. She's sharp as a tack. She's out all the time, and she's always got great stories to tell about the Packer and growing up around there. From the ashes rose a new hospital. The hospital received a contract for the purchase of Robert Packer Hospital bonds by the Public Works Administration, enabling the hospital to receive a federal loan of up to $420,000 for the completion of a new hospital. These are more shots of the 1933-34 construction. And this is how it all looked after the completion of the new hospital. The Guthrie Clinic is in the foreground. And there's the mansion. This is the Robert Packer Hospital and Guthrie Clinic. This, again, was purchased with the bonds. And the public could not be asked for donations to build the new building. After all, the average salary of a railroad worker in Sayre in 1934 was $7 a week. This is a good shot of the hospital and campus after the completion of the new hospital. And there's a ward in the new hospital. And here we are with food again. This was the floor pantry of the kitchen in the new hospital. A student nurse was removing a patient tray from the dumbwaiter. There was a carousel that went up through the floors in the wall that carried the meal trains. And when I first started working at the Robert Packer Hospital in 1977, we still had the dumbwaiter, and the older employees explained to me that the carousel was still up in the walls, but what a disastrous thing that was, because it would stall and trays would fly off the carousel. So they had a real mess with that. And the ambulance changed again. This is Dr. Guthrie and Howard Bishop after a hunt. The car license is dated 1940, and you can see they both got their deer. Dr. and Mrs. Guthrie with Dr. Guthrie's sister. This is the campus in the 1940s. This is one of my favorites. It shows the mansion and Dr. Guthrie's home. You can see that they are right in the heart of the campus. There's the mansion, there's Dr. Guthrie's home. The mansion was torn down in 1961 to make way for the Patterson Lab and later the Stedge Pavilion. The Guthrie home was torn down when the Patterson Education was added to the School of Nursing. This is the Guthrie Clinic after the wings and lobby were added in 1956. This is Charles H. Mayo. He was an intern at RPH in 1958 and 1959. And his son, Charles W. Mayo II, was born at the Robert Packer Hospital on September 6, 1958. So another generation of Mayos connected to the hospital. My birthday is also September 6th, so I'm always impressed with the fact that he was born on my birthday. Not my year, but... And this is Dr. Guthrie with Thomas Watson, the founder of the IBM. I threw that in because Dr. Guthrie was well connected with people all across the country. This is Mrs. Guthrie when she cuts the ribbon in Howard Elmer Park for the June Feet, which was an annual event of the hospital. And Peggy, you probably remember going to June Feets. This is Dr. Guthrie celebrating his 45th anniversary in 1955. This is the Guthrie's Christmas tree. Their living room. And this is Dr. Hawk, Dr. Guthrie, Mrs. Guthrie, and Dr. George Carling at the annual pig dinner held in the Guthrie home each year for the medical staff. A roast pig was grandly carried into the dining room and carved by Dr. Carling and Dr. Hawk. After the guests dined on a traditional menu consisting of roast pig, sauerkraut, creamed onions, mashed potatoes, vanilla ice cream, and a special superb chocolate sauce. Right there. Okay. Peggy owns that buffet. And this is a picture of Dr. Dominic Motze. Dr. Motze succeeded Dr. Guthrie. Bird Sumner, Dr. Katie. And standing is Dr. Henry Rentschler, Dr. Manley Rockman, Dr. Perry, Dr. Stanley Conklin at the pig dinner. Bird Sumner's right in the middle, sitting down. Okay, this is a movie of the pig dinner. That's Dr. Carling. Dr. Conklin. See the pigs all dressed up? It gets a little clearer. There's Mrs. Guthrie. Mrs. Guthrie again. Going to take the hat off the pig. And there's Dr. Guthrie. What's neat about this is it's at least 70 years old. And that's the end of that. Dr. Guthrie also wrote sheet music, and that's a copy of one of his songs. And unfortunately, we couldn't find somebody to come play it tonight, but maybe someday we'll get somebody to play that for us. The square around Howard Elmer Park is dedicated to Dr. Guthrie, and that was on September 28, 1957. This is Dr. Guthrie with the plaque that's honoring him. It's going, Matt, but it's not playing, so.
While you're working on that, can I describe my mom was a nurse. She went through nurses training. So they're going to be meeting Dr. Guthrie. So she's standing there with her head up,
Oh, okay.
waiting to meet him. And then he came, and he was so short.
Okay,
That
listen very carefully.
members of the Sheriff Council, members of the clergy, ladies and gentlemen, this is an honor which I deeply and truly appreciate because it comes from members of these different communities who have been my good friends, many of them patients in the past years that I have lived among you and worked for you. I accepted the position at the hospital upon the advice of my distinguished father, a nationally known surgeon of Wilkes-Barre, because he pointed out that I would have complete charge of a small hospital in a small town and could carry out the staff organization that I had learned at the Mayo Clinic, where I had been a surgical assistant for 3.5 years. I went through a very trying period with one intern, later one assistant. I was administrator as well as surgeon. I collected all the monies, kept the books, bought all the food, medical and surgical supplies, paid the hospital workers their wages and salaries. It was a busy time, but I learned a lot about hospital management, which has been a valuable asset. I found very quickly that I was taking care of splendid people, honest, self-respecting, appreciative people, and they became my good friends as well as grateful patients. I've always had my goal, a clinic and a hospital that would give the finest possible service to the people of these communities, an excellent medical service within the reach of people in moderate circumstances. I worked to further the education and training of young aspiring doctors who had the will and ambition to perfect their work and practice the highest type of medicine. We now have a well-known teaching program with eager young men from many lands: China, the Philippines, Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Jordan, Hungary, South America, Canada, besides young doctors from our own wide continent, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Our nurses training school, which which is a source of great pride and comfort to me, has an enviable reputation and is looked upon by nurse educators as one of the fine training schools of our country. We teach the art of nursing as well as nursing arts. Several times I've been asked to head large hospitals and centers, but each time I have refused because I grew to love this valley and its fine people. And so this great honor that you are paying me means more to me than I can express, for it is an evidence of your appreciation of my work and efforts. To have this evidence of esteem and affection of you, with whom I have lived and worked these many years, is the crowning reward of my career, and my heart is too full to adequately tell you my thanks. My heart is indeed full of gratitude to you all for this wonderful honor you have paid me. With all my heart,
So that was Dr. Guthrie's last public,
members of the Sheriff's Council,
his last public appearance. And I don't know how much of it you got, but that was the speech that he gave when they named the square around Howard Elmer Park and, to honor him. And we found this record in storage at the hospital in a cardboard box, a phonograph record, and this is what was on it. So we had an AV department back in the day, and they worked to get the scratches and everything off it. And I think it's pretty amazing that we have the voice of Dr. Guthrie and telling, why he came to Sayre and what his dream was. This is Dr. Guthrie and Mrs. Guthrie on the bandstand during the presentation. This is the boulder that was erected in the park for the plaque. This is the photo of Dr. Guthrie that was used for his formal painting. And this is Dr. Guthrie's funeral in 1958. He died at the Robert Packer Hospital on October 30th, 1958. The funeral was at the Church of the Redeemer in Sayre. Pallbearers were from left Howard Bishop, Bert Sumner, Dr. Rodney Stedge, John Murray Jr., Dr. Malin Martin, Dr. Albert Mertland, Dr. Dominic Motze, Dr. Gerald Gagan, and Dr. William C. Beck. This is the Guthrie campus with the addition of the North Building and the first building of the Guthrie Clinic, all part of the Century II building project. And ambulances continue to change. This is a view of the campus with the second clinic building, the cafeteria building, and the additional floors that were added to the North Building. This was the surgery building addition. This is Dr. Guthrie's dream fulfilled. The annual pig dinner was recreated by the food and nutrition staff for the medical staff during the commemorative year of 2010, when we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Guthrie Clinic and the 125th anniversary of the Robert Packer Hospital and the arrival of Dr. Guthrie. The traditional menu was served by Mrs. Guthrie was recreated for this event to include her famous chocolate sauce because we have her recipes in the Guthrie archives. This was the medical staff of the Guthrie Clinic in 2010 at the pig dinner. So it's changed a little bit from 1925. This is enjoying the feast. The dining room at Robert Packer Hospital was packed for the occasion. We reenacted the arrival of Dr. Guthrie, and this was a parade that we sent through downtown Sayre. Dr. Guthrie came to the train station, as he did in 1910. A horse and wagon took him to Guthrie, and we had a big parade through Sayre and followed him through town over to the clinic. And this is Dr. Guthrie arriving on the campus. So we went from this in 1885. This I took off the internet the other day. Somebody took a picture of the campus today in 2022. So how it's changed in all these years. And that's my presentation. Question?
Asa Packard was referred to as honorable or judge. Was that an appointment or was
It was like a justice of the peace sort of thing, and they called him.
like Colonel Sanders?
Yeah. Well, it's like the district magistrates, they call them judge, they call them honorable. I'm the mayor of Sayre, they call me honorable.
Will you tell me again about the mansion versus their house? I got them mixed up in my mind. What was the difference between the Guthrie mansion and the house that, or whatever, the mansion and the house of Guthrie?
Well, the mansion was the hospital.
The mansion was the house.
Yeah.
That was the first.
Hospital. That was the first hospital.
And that stayed there a long time.
1961, that was torn down.
Yeah, my own parents always felt that the two mansions being torn down was not literally in the dead of night, but they said it had that feeling that the public didn't know about it, and it was just done. Do you know anything about that?
Well, there was a lot of discontent, when they, especially when they tore the mansion down. In 1961, people didn't have as much feeling for things as they do now. In the 50s, a lot of antiques got cut off, and they were trying to modernize everything, and the reason being they needed to expand the facility, and that was the only way that they had land. Remember, back before construction got as savvy as it is today, that was all ponds out and back. And there weren't a lot of places that they could go to build the hospital up. To stay with the building, I don't think I can get to one of those slides, but I think I turned it off. There's all of this stuff out here. That's all on floating foundations. And that's new technology. So they were trying to stay out on the Wilbur Avenue side of things and trying to expand that way. And actually, Dr. Guthrie's house was used by the residents, and I think they trashed it pretty bad. By the time it was torn down, I think it was ready to be torn down.
When was that torn down?
69, I think they built the Patterson building.
And the connection with the Mayo Clinic, that was just because Steve was so far away. I mean, did they take a train to try to get to the?
Changed, yeah. But he interned there, and then,
That was just it was a personal connection.
yes. Yeah. But he brought their concept to Sayre.
I have two brief family stories about Dr. Guthrie and the Packard Hospital. I'm going to read from my family history. In November 1914, when he was just 8 years old, Dana Manchester had appendicitis and had to be hospitalized in Sayre, Pennsylvania, at Packard Hospital. His mother accompanied him for the duration of his stay. Dr. Guthrie, surgeon at Packard Hospital, was his doctor. In an attempt to have minimal disturbance on the ward, Dr. Guthrie offered Dana 5 cents for every day that Dana was a good boy. How much cash the young lad made, I don't know. I thought that showed a different side of Dr. Guthrie. The other is my grandfather. Hold on a second. In early February, and this has to do with ambulances as well. In early February 1916, Dick Manchester was kicked in the lower back by a cow. Several days later, he developed a high fever and excruciating pain. Again, Doc Williams of Potterville was summoned. He had no diagnosis, but insisted that Dick be taken to the hospital in Sayre, a distance of more than 20 miles. Neighbor Raleigh Beckwith came, remember it's February, with his bobsled, and Dick was loaded and bundled up and loaded on. Raleigh took him 12 miles to Nichols, New York, where Dick was transferred to the train for the next leg of his journey. When the train arrived in Sayre, it was met by the local undertaker, who loaded Dick into his hearse for the short trip to Packard Hospital. At the hospital, Dr. Guthrie diagnosed an abscess on the kidney. Surgery was performed, and Dick began his long road to recovery. In these days before antibiotics, he remained a patient for more than 2 months.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. Chip, you have a story.
This is a little sad. The story I had was based on a Spring Hill story where the Wells girl
No. Yes?
You mentioned that you have a brother, you had a brother or have a brother in Bethlehem.
Yeah, he was listening tonight on the,
What's that?
he was on the live stream tonight.
Okay. So were you from that area?
No, no, I'm from here.
From that area. And I bought a farm here in Bradford County in 1955. Well, I had a brother, an older brother, that was in the Marines. And of course, if people knew of Northampton County or Lehigh County and come to Bradford County, this is nothing. I mean, you're going into the wilderness. And he was so afraid that my mother and father was with me. And, you know, what kind of doctors or hospitals they had here. But when he got done with his investigation, it was, the Robert Packard Hospital was one of the best hospitals in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else? All right, thank you all for coming tonight.
No. Thank you, Henry. And next month we have a program, The Amazing Life and Political Career of David Wilmot, and that will be presented by Dr. William Lewis, and he's among other things, a commissioner with the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission, and he has done a lot of research on David Wilmot over his life, so I think there'll be a new perspective there that we'll have for that. So thank you again for coming. Help yourself to tour the museum, and see you next month.